Hey everyone, I am super excited to introduce the all-new MotionFlex Invisible series. This next generation of Invisibles features a number of breakthroughs in both installation and audio quality that truly challenges the notion that Invisibles simply don't sound as good as Visibles. Well, our next generation is truly a no compromise in both aesthetics and sound quality. So let's dive right in. In this presentation, we'll talk about why we are revamping our Invisible product line, the many advancements in performance and installation, and we'll finish by introducing the full product family, along with when we expect these new products to hit the market. Why are we introducing new Invisibles? Because no other type of speaker embodies Sonance's design philosophy and product strategy of designed to disappear better than invisible speakers. So, we embarked on a multi-year research project to answer the question, how can we make a better invisible speaker? Out of that research came several technologies that have unlocked a true leap forward in performance. So ultimately, this category is incredibly important to us, and our goal is to be the leader in invisible speakers. We are making some bold claims on our next generation. No compromise invisible speakers, game-changing performance. Now let's talk about the research, design, and the resulting new technologies we developed that back up these fidelity and performance claims. For the last 10 plus years, we have been using Klippel R&D tools to build better speakers in a methodical, scientific way. This has unlocked a level of performance that has enabled Sonance speakers to compete sonically with some of the most renowned hi-fi speaker brands. One of the most important tools is our laser scanner, which magnifies the motion of moving parts thousands of times, allowing us to optimize that motion at a microscopic level. The result is that our speakers have far less distortion and coloration than what would be possible otherwise. But while Klippel laser scanning works great for cone speakers, it was not designed to be used with flat panels like you find in invisible speakers. So we modified our equipment and adapted it for use with invisible speakers and created new testing methodologies that revealed the peculiarities of flat panel speakers. Part of the innovation of this new product line is the invention of new measurement techniques that helped us optimize and elevate performance to a new tier. Because of the proprietary nature of the tools we now have, it will be extremely difficult for competitors to keep up. We believe the studies and optimizations we have made are a first for invisible speakers. And that's a lot of talk about Klippel laser scanning, so what does it actually do? Well, here's a motion study of flat panels excited in two different ways. This is an example of the data that Klippel laser scanning provides. This is going to lead us to a critical factor in getting great sound out of an invisible speaker. What you're seeing on the left is an upper mid-range test tone, 3 kHz to be exact, being reproduced by the flat panel of one of our new speakers. The motion is magnified 1,000 times and slowed down about 1,000 times. Remember, this motion is so small and so fast that it's completely imperceivable to the naked eye. But with the help of our modified Klippel machine, we can see that it looks kind of like a stone dropped into a pond. This is called bending wave motion. And when properly optimized, we can get ultra smooth mids and highs in a hemispherical wavefront for outstanding off-axis response. In other words, bending wave is awesome for even dispersion as wide as 170 degrees, but this motion struggles with bass. So what do we do about bass? Well, we need a different type of motion for bass reproduction. The panel needs to move like a piston, and that's what we see on the right. This motion is excellent for low frequency extension and dynamic, punchy bass. But at mid-range frequencies and higher, the panel starts to break up in an undesirable way. So we have these two different motion types that complement each other perfectly, as long as we keep them from interfering with one another. We don't want the ripples of the bending wave breaking up our pistonic motion. And likewise, we don't want the pulses of the piston modulating our bending wave, which would create a colored and muddy sound without definition. Well, it turns out that solving that problem of isolation was one of the keys to unlocking high fidelity in an invisible speaker. More on that later. These studies became our North Star. for design and development of these next generation invisible speakers. To get smooth, articulate mids and highs, we need to implement bending wave motion. To get deep, impactful bass, we need to implement pistonic motion. And critically, we need to keep these two types of motion isolated from one another to maintain clarity, low distortion, and high fidelity. Now let's look at how we accomplish that. Here is our new IS-8 invisible speaker. Let's pull it apart and discover how we solved the challenge of making an invisible speaker that sounds as good as, and in some ways exceeds the performance of, a visible speaker. Introducing Motion Flex technology. This is a suite of advancements in speaker engineering that together delivers unparalleled acoustic performance and redefines what is possible out of an invisible speaker. So let's unpack Motion Flex, starting with the diaphragm. In an invisible speaker, we obviously need a front panel that is coplanar with the wall or ceiling installation surface in order for it to truly disappear into the architecture of a space. After studying the motion properties of dozens of materials, we selected a fiber-reinforced composite that has exceptional consistency, flatness, temperature stability, and perhaps most importantly, has phenomenal acoustic properties. Of course, this panel can't move on its own. It needs to be driven by transducers. That leads us to the next two components of Motion Flex technology, starting with our all-new WaveFlex drive unit. This is a high bandwidth, mid-range, and high-frequency transducer all in one. Its oversized 44mm voice coil attaches directly to the front panel diaphragm and drives it into propagating sound via the bending wave principle. This delivers velvety smooth mids, crystal clear highs. Because this drive unit extends all the way down into the lower mids, we have implemented an ultra-low crossover point which facilitates improved dispersion characteristics that we'll touch on in just a moment. One of the most demonstrable advances of this new line of speakers is the impressive bass response. And we've achieved this with our new carbon fiber AirFlex woofer. Now this woofer doesn't directly drive the diaphragm. Instead, our AirFlex woofer couples to a chamber of air behind the diaphragm, resulting in the piston-like movement that we need for robust and powerful bass that defies expectations. So we have our WaveFlex drive unit reproducing mids and highs, and our AirFlex woofer digging deep into the bass frequencies. As you recall, we needed a way to keep the motion of these two transducers isolated, and that's where our acoustically isolating baffle comes into play. We permanently bond the diaphragm to the baffle in the area shown. This effectively splits the diaphragm into two active areas that are completely isolated. The isolating baffle prevents the bending motion of the WaveFlex drive unit from interfering with the pistonic motion of the AirFlex woofer. And this is the secret to how Motion Flex technology enables ultra-low distortion and a level of sonic transparency not previously possible in invisible speakers. But there's one more component of Motion Flex to talk about that we touched on a little bit earlier, and that's the CDX crossover. As mentioned before, the crossover point is set to an uncommonly low frequency in the lower mid-range. With this configuration, our new Invisibles have nearly 180 degrees of horizontal and vertical dispersion and smooth off-axis frequency response, resulting in consistent tonality regardless of whether the listener is directly in front of the speaker or even at extreme angles to the side of the speaker. We call this effect constant directivity, hence the name CDX. This means every speaker provides greater immersion and coverage. Sound just appears to come from everywhere. So that's Motion Flex technology and a peek inside the performance features of our new Invisible series. Though we have just walked through the new IS-8 model, the technologies we are talking about are applicable to all full-range speakers in our new Invisible lineup. To recap, some key takeaways about Motion Flex technology. The WaveFlex drive unit reproduces smooth, articulate mids and highs using bending wave motion. The AirFlex woofer delivers powerful, punchy bass for true full-range performance from a single invisible panel. And the baffle keeps the motion of each transducer acoustically isolated, and this reduces distortion and coloration for an invisible speaker that's no longer a compromise sonically. Our inert, fiber-reinforced diaphragm is flat with consistent geometry, durable, and lightweight. And finally, the CDX crossover provides 170 degrees of horizontal and vertical coverage and even tonality no matter where the listener is in the space. Now let's move on to installation, which can be a common objection to adopting invisible speakers. So I'm ecstatic to talk about some advancements we have made to help overcome installation objections by making the install process easier and more foolproof for more consistent aesthetics and performance. Our new line of invisibles can be installed like a drywall patch and then finished up to or finished over. Let's review that process. Here we have a stud bay with a drywall cutout for our new IS8. Let's connect the speaker, place it in the cutout, and screw it down. Now is the best time to test the speaker to make sure it's working properly. Next, we apply fast-setting hot mud to fill the gaps between the drywall and the speaker. And just as the hot mud is about to cure, we tape up the seams with a little bit of tape overlap. Now we're ready to start feathering drywall mud up to the surface of the speaker and blending into the rest of the wall surface. We can optionally choose to finish over with a skim coat on top of the center surface of the diaphragm up to 3 millimeters. The last step is to apply our final finish, in this example, prime and paint. This was an example of one of the most common finish types, but our new Invisible series is compatible with a wider range of finishes than any other invisible speakers on the market. You can finish up to or finish over the surface of the speaker with up to 3 millimeters of flexible material, like drywall mud or topping compound, wallpaper, veneer, acrylic-based Venetian plaster. As long as it's a flexible material, 3 millimeters or less, you will get outstanding results. You may be thinking, how can I possibly know the finish thickness? Especially with drywall mud. How do I know if I've exceeded 3 millimeters? How can we establish a thickness target with a subcontractor and then validate that they've hit that target? Well, our next generation IS has an embedded system to answer those questions. Let's take another look at our new IS8 and pull back the diaphragm once again so that I can introduce the Sonance Depth Identification Sensing Calibrator System, or simply put, the Sonance Disc System. It is a series of 4 steel discs embedded behind the diaphragm. These act as indexes for precisely measuring the amount of finishing material applied over the surface of the speaker. Now, of course, by themselves, these discs don't do anything. But by using our handheld depth gauge, available as an accessory, we can sense the location of these discs, thereby measuring the finish thickness that has been applied to the surface. Now achieving a consistent finish, whether your target is a 0.5 millimeter skim coat or a 1 millimeter layer of drywall mud or other finishes up to 3 millimeters, we can give a quantifiable method to specify a finish with a subcontractor and then validate that the thickness spec was met before the final finishing stages like painting are initiated. Here's a simple example of how the disc system works. We have a new IS8 invisible speaker installed into a 16-inch on-center 2x4 stud bay. You can also see standard 1/2-inch drywall panels on either side of the speaker. So we tape our joints and apply drywall mud for a smooth, flat surface that completely hides the speaker. After curing, we place our probe against the surface of the embedded discs, and we get a reading in this case that exceeds the 3 millimeter maximum. So we know we need to remove material. So we're going to sand and measure again, and we'll repeat this process until we achieve the target thickness. Here we've hit 1.5 millimeters, that's perfect. So because we can now quantify finish thickness with high accuracy, you might want to know, what is the recommended finish thickness then? We have designed these speakers knowing that in most cases they will be installed with a finish over them, so we've optimized the new Invisible series to perform their best with between 1 to 1.5 millimeters of topping compound or other types of flexible materials. And as I've mentioned, a maximum of 3 millimeters, which is industry leading. And our DSP amps will have preset curves so that you can achieve visible speaker performance with our next generation IS, regardless of the finish type and thickness from 0 to 3 millimeters. While we're looking at stud bass, our new IS speakers have narrow rear profiles, so they are now compatible with stud and joist spacing as narrow as 12-inch or 305 millimeters on center. Now let's talk about accessories for easier installs and better results. First up are zip rings. These are pre-construction brackets similar to flex brackets for traditional speakers. These are installed directly onto framing, and they include tabs to make centering the brackets a breeze. The idea here is that drywall is hung directly over these rings. They then act as a guide for a zip tool, which makes getting the perfect cutout much easier. They stay in place after the hole is cut and the speaker is installed. Really great installation tool available in all sizes for our upcoming products. We have updated our space savers. These are now 100% high-quality corrugated cardboard. This makes them extremely lightweight and easier to transport compared to our current space savers and those you find from competitors. But the other benefit here is that they are flat packable. We use a robust cardboard, so they are reusable and recyclable, creating minimal waste on the job site. There's cable management built in as well, and like the other accessories, these will come in all sizes for the upcoming IS product family. And finally, we have noise isolating enclosures that can be installed on any size of our upcoming IS speaker lineup. These are great for attenuating noise that might otherwise bleed into adjoining rooms. We are in the testing phase to quantify exactly how many decibels of reduction to expect, and those figures will be part of the product specifications coming in the next few weeks. To recap installation advancements, the proprietary Sonance disc system is an innovative method for controlling finish thickness and ultimately product performance with quantifiable metrics. Compatibility with 12-inch on-center stud and joist spacing means our new Invisibles fit in more spaces than ever before. And as you will see in our product lineup, we have a single product line that can be finish up to or finish over. This simplifies our product offering and makes system configuration easier. And finally, there is a complete family of accessory products for pre-construction or retrofit applications to make install more foolproof and reduce noise leakage into adjacent rooms. We sincerely hope you are as excited to get your hands on these new speakers as we are to get them in your hands as soon as possible. Thanks for listening.